It was the biggest bushfire in 15 years. It devastated Cape Town's South Peninsula, reducing Table Mountain to a scorched earth. The fire also unleashed a flood of generosity and a parade of honor for the heroic firefighters. And despite the damage they cause, fires regenerate nature. Unlike the devastating impact of shack fires on informal settlements, they destroy communities, homes and lives. Burns are a leading cause of death and injury to children. Survivors endure physical agony and social isolation. A benefit concert called Bands for Burn Victims to raise awareness and funds for burn survivors. South African band Freshly Ground was the lead act and band member Kyla Rose Smith, the Bands for Burns ambassador. She's also a burn survivor.
It was a very traumatic experience, not only for me, but also for my family and for my parents. And it's quite a, obviously, very impactful experience for much of my adolescence.
One of the therapies we use in the burns unit is actually music therapy, alongside with art therapy. But the music therapy is the one therapy that appeals to all the children, regardless of their background or their circumstances. And I so wish I could have the whole ward here today to see you guys.
The C2 Burns Unit at Cape Town's Red Cross Children's Hospital is the only dedicated pediatric burn specialist unit in Africa and the only unit treating children under the age of 13 with burn injuries in the Western Cape. Each year, more than 3,500 children with serious burns are treated here. 85% of the patients are younger than 6. 98% are from disadvantaged communities.
I always say, don't go to a ward if you want to see true heroes. Come to a burns unit, because this is where you see that side of humanity that you will love. And that's why we love this work, despite the odd, really sad cases. There is that incredible spirit of humanity and of survival and of getting better that you see here.
One of the unit's former patients is a little girl called Michelle Mortibi. In 2012, she was locked up in a shack together with her younger brother, Freddie. A candle fell over and set the shack alight. No one noticed the flames until it was too late. Her little brother was rescued unharmed, but Michelle suffered third-degree burns to 86% of her body. At the time, she was 5 years old. She was given little chance of survival.
She got a very, very severe triple infection of the worst bugs you can possibly get in a burn.
I visited the Red Cross Burns unit to learn more about Michelle's case. In this ward, the patients are so vulnerable to infection that visitors are required to wear scrubs. Due to the severity of Michelle's infections, the doctors had given up all hope.
What we do then is we just give them morphine, we keep them comfortable, we feed them, we allow visitors, we just put them in a quiet place where they can have the maximum peace and comfort.
And until they die?
Yeah, until they die, which normally happens within hours, sometimes days.
But 5 days later, Michelle was still very much alive.
I one day went to ask if she wanted to drink something, and she told me, and I fetched, and I came back and she gave me a big song and dance about, I told you I didn't want juice, I wanted milkshake. And I looked at this picture and we realized that she wasn't dying. Beyond all the experts and beyond everything we know from these kind of burns, she wasn't dying. And at that stage we managed to find donor skin for her, and that's what turned her around.
In another, more affluent part of Cape Town, in another hospital, a parallel, heartbreaking narrative was taking place. As 5-year-old Michelle stubbornly clung to life, Andrew Meddick's life suddenly slipped away. He died almost overnight of viral encephalitis. He was 15 years old.
It was a very virulent one because, you know, people can recover from that kind of thing. And what the doctor said is that it was probably the herpes simplex strain, which I understand is the more aggressive one, and you pick it up like you pick up a common cold or flu. It just happens to be a brain virus. So
Andrew was a student at Bishop's College. He excelled at his studies, was a gifted musician and sportsman, and a popular student who reached out to others less fortunate than him.
he was very, very generous. I know, and it's funny enough, I only found out a lot of it after he died. He was involved in quite a few of the outreach programs at school, where he went into some of the disadvantaged communities and did work with underprivileged kids.
He was also an organ donor, but the viral encephalitis had infected all his organs. The only organ he could donate was his skin. South Africa does not have a skin bank, yet this organ makes the difference between life and death.
It just provides all the things that skin provides to us. So you don't lose moisture, you're protected against infection, you don't lose heat, and all of those things normalize your metabolic state just to pull you through and make you strong enough to survive the next round. Without that, it's actually almost impossible to pull a very big burn through. And because we don't have a skin bank, we rely on fresh donors. Removing the skin is very quick. We only use skin from the back of the body, so that if people want to view the body, there's no damage done. It's a very absolute paper thin, almost transparent little layer that we took off.
Donor skin can cover burn survivors for several weeks while their own skin begins to heal. So Michelle's skin was saved by Andrew's. His death gave her the gift of life. But as she recovered, a mother had to deal with wounds that never fully heal.
Has it gotten easier, better? Does it ever?
I remember in the beginning, you go and see all these counsellors and people trying to give you advice, and they always say time heals and that kind of thing. It's not about that. It's about learning to live with a loss. I suppose my son died and saved her life.
Almost every day in South Africa, there is a fire in an informal settlement, and the city struggles to cope.
And during that week when we had the large South Peninsula fire, there were 600 other fires simultaneously that we have to contend with.
Statistics are incomplete, and there is no research on the long-term impact of fires on shack dwellers. But with the numbers swelling of the urban poor living in informal settlements, they are becoming increasingly vulnerable to fires.
In the South African context, like the informal settlements since 1994 have gone up almost 1,000%, from like 300 informal settlements to almost close to 2,700 informal settlements in 2010. Now that kind of increase in informal settlement, when there is a very progressive housing subsidy program in South Africa, makes you really question, is the policies of government actually solving the problems of the urban poor in South Africa?
Increasing densification in informal settlements because of aggressive and rapid urbanizations. Cape Town is the fastest urbanizing city in South Africa. So we are seeing very significant numbers of people moving into the city very quickly, and that significantly outpaces the housing delivery ability.
In Cape Town, there is currently a backlog of 375,000 formal houses. By 2031, this shortage is expected to grow to 833,000. Based on its current resources, land shortages, and a limited national housing budget, the city says it can only build 6,100 houses per year, which means it would take about 70 years to eradicate informal settlements.
Informal settlements are here to stay. I think that's the bottom line. I think it's only a question of how are you going to support communities in managing those informal settlements.
Each and every year when it comes the winter, we are scared because we know there will be lives that we will lose.
In winter, the number of fires inevitably increases, but the city says there has been a decrease in loss of life.
The ongoing awareness sessions and the ongoing electrification of informal settlements means that we've seen fewer people dying in fires every year.
The number of times that we've actually responded has decreased somewhat this year. We've gone down by about 70 from about 3,069 structures that were affected to 2,960.
We had a desirable reduction in fires for a few years, and at least we stabilized that figure. For the last 2 years, or the last year and a half, that has not been the case. We've seen the number of fires increase.
Why is that?
Load shedding is a big part of it. You are taking already electrified communities and forcing them to use candles and gas stoves and other flammable devices for heating and illumination, which creates risk. So that's certainly a part of the problem.
The city has made sure that we have got especially newer type fire engines which can get into areas that we couldn't get into before. Our fire engines are a little bit smaller. They carry a little bit more water, but they are off-road vehicles which allow us to go into the informal settlement areas a lot easier.
The way the city treats the issue around fire has been much more reactive than proactive, so they've always addressed fire as a way to kind of go through, provide relief, provide the fire services, but the cost of a fire like the one that happened at BM section is just something that's unimaginable.
Our capacity has increased over the last few years, but it's by no means up to the standard where we would actually like to have a certain amount of firefighters.
The fire department may well respond more rapidly and put the fire out and prevent it from being a 800 shack fire, confine it to a 40 shack fire. But the starting of the fire is in the hands of the community, so the awareness sessions are very important. We do about 700, 800 awareness sessions a year at this stage.
It's unreasonable to expect that government is ever going to find the answers of all the informal settlement dwellers in the city. But it's very reasonable to expect that jointly, if people living in informal settlements collaborate with the city, then there's a much better chance that solutions can be found together.
One of the more proactive partnerships between shack dwellers, NGOs and the city originated at UCT, where a team of engineers devised an award-winning fire detector called the Lumkani.
The first thing we do when we detect a fire is we give an audible alert to tell the person in the shack if there's a fire that they have got to make sure that they can either put the fire out or escape. The other thing about it is because of the density of settlements like this, it's important if one shack's on fire that all the neighbours know as soon as possible. So very shortly after we detect the fire, we will alert the neighbouring shacks through a wireless radio link that there is a fire in the area and they must please be aware that there could be something which they have to be aware of.
Simply put, the Lumkani operates as a community response alarm. The devices communicate through a signal within a 100-metre radius. This provides a critical early warning system that can reduce the devastation and save lives.
One of the key design requirements of the Lumkani device is that it is simple to operate, that it doesn't require sophistication, that it doesn't require levels of literacy which child-headed households would not have. With this device, it's quite feasible to put a fire detector in every single shack in South Africa.
Technology is only as good as the relationship and engagement with the people who use it.
Partnering with Shack Dwellers International, the Informal Settlement Network, Fed Up and the community organisation Resource Centre, the Lumkani was first launched in March 2014 in Khayelitsha's UT Gardens.
From the outset, we also, as a team, operated from the position of, we don't know anything. So we really aren't the experts. And community members and community leaders, that's where the knowledge power lies, the lived everyday experience.
Since we have structures of 400, we need all of us to have this, because if I have, maybe my neighbor, they don't have, when the fire starts with that neighbor, there's no one that they going to know unless the fire came to my house. So is that where that Lumkani device is going to ring to let us, all the community, know?
The Lumkani has been rolled out to 400 shacks in Khayelitsha. In December 2014, the device faced its greatest challenge when a shack fire broke out in the area. It sent out an early warning system, preventing the fire from spreading and saving countless lives.
The biggest impact was when they had a fire after the Lumkani device was installed. So the real test was when a fire happened that people could actually see the benefits of something like that.
Soon, communities in Siyashlala, Umfuleni and other informal settlements requested the device. I accompanied one of the community leaders to distribute lumkani in Umfuleni.
We are trying, but whatever we are doing, we get it reminded from the community. Many communities now are the one who calling us and saying, we want that things, we want that things. And for us, it shows that it is working.
Should a fire break out here, these children will have a much greater chance of being rescued. Unlike these children, 6 years old, 3 years, 18 months, the youngest a mere 15 months. They were recently burnt alive in a shack while their mother was in church.
It was not nice because you feel the kids, because you already know they were trying, they were crying, want help, but there was no one who was going to help them.
Had a fire detector or effective deterrent been on hand when Michelle Motibi was burnt, she might have avoided severe injury. Instead, scarred and disfigured, she faces a painful, traumatic road ahead. In 2014, 2 years after the tragic death of her son Andrew Medic, Shelley Mackay-Davidson established a trust in his name to raise funds for burn survivors. A lawyer and musician, it was she who organized the Bands for Burn Victims concert, together with her partner and fellow musician, Johnny Ray.
It's nice to see the camaraderie of people, you know, and there's so much in this country and so many things that need to be fixed and done, and it's nice to see people actually trying to help.
Michelle Motibi was one of the beneficiaries. After 8 months in hospital, she was sent to St. Joseph's Home for chronically ill children. She never returned home to her family.
Yes, this is a very big burden to look after a child like this, to regularly come back to hospital, to regularly come back for more operations, to lose work time, to have people sniggering and staring at you. It's very hard. And the majority of people eventually just give up and they can't do this any longer, and they leave the child somewhere at an institution and they move on with their life.
Most of the children at St. Joseph's come from disadvantaged environments. In addition to coping with horrific injuries, burn survivors are often isolated and ostracized by society. But in hospital, Michelle received love and support from a reflexologist and Red Cross volunteer called Anne Pickering.
I wasn't sure if she was going to pull through. I'd go in a bit more often. I'd go in 2 or 3 times a week, not knowing if she was still going to be there. And then I'd go in as often as I could.
3 years on, she continues to share an extraordinary bond with Michelle, who today is a feisty, bright grade 2 pupil.
It's so rewarding seeing her blossom.
Hello, my name is Michelle.
She's cheeky, lively, just like any normal kid. She's just turned 8. And to watch her progress, she has her down moments. I mean, she's still got a lot to go through. But when she's jumping around with such a beautiful smile, it's great fun to be with her and to see her respond to positivity.
She's got a very strong personality. Sometimes she can be very stubborn. She's one of my bright sparks. She manages the work very well. So I don't have a problem academically with her. She's doing very well at school.
But like all burn survivors, Michelle has to cope with society's inability to embrace difference, especially from children her own age.
When she gets teased, then you can see she's withdrawn or she's angry, and then she don't want to talk, don't want to say anything.
Part of her life fell away and nobody was ever constant. And my last words to her whenever I see her is, I'm coming back. You know I'll come back.
Anne is not the only constant in her life. She has also been embraced by the mother of the young man whose skin saved her life.
I think Andrew would have wanted it. I suppose I was curious, and I also, the whole idea for creating this benefit fund in Andrew's name was to raise money for children like Michelle. So I thought, I need to meet her and see what she's like, and just to get a sense of what children like her go through, what their lives are like.
Try and imagine sticking your hand in a fire until your fingers burn off. Multiply that by 10, and she's been through it. It boggles my mind. That moment when it happened, what she must have gone through.
Shelley and Johnny have welcomed Michelle into their homes and into their lives.
I didn't want her to think that every single time she sees us it's going to be a treat or something fabulous. Also that she must just be part of the family in the home. She'll walk next to me but behind me, kind of hide, and she wants to wear a hat. But then when she realizes, because I also felt a bit self-conscious for her, when she realizes that people aren't actually stopping and staring at her and pointing fingers, then she relaxes a bit and then she's fine. And then she'll run around like any other kid.
As the child grows in this very tight skin, you have to keep on keeping that mobility, make sure there are no new contractures developing. When they do, we need to constantly reoperate them, improve them, until they're adults and they stop growing, and of course then it gets a little bit less frequent. But it's a lifelong rehabilitative process.
The biggest eye-opener for me was that before I met Michelle, I didn't really think about people who'd suffered burns because you don't see them. They're like a hidden society.
Unless you've lost something functional, just because you're scarred and people don't know how to look at you, you actually can't get a disability grant. So these people just go in hiding, they go and sit in shacks for the rest of their life, or eventually they just can't take it anymore. The few that we know about.
Michelle has already triumphed over unimaginable trauma, but there remains an immense sadness in her. The memory of the fire, the fear of being abandoned by those she loves. She hasn't seen her family since she was sent to St. Joseph's. Her mother was 15 when Michelle was born, and her grandmother is her legal guardian, but she has been ill and is unemployed.
It was in the beginning of the year, and we usually, when the school starts, we ask the children who's gone home. I saw that she was very depressed, and I asked her, didn't she went home? So she said no, but she was very sad. I made it my mission to look for her family. I asked her grandmother for a photo of her prior to the fire, and I showed her the photo, and she was her face lit up. She actually wanted to let the other children know that I didn't always look like this. I was like normal, my face were normal.
Through St. Joseph's, I made contact with a social worker who assists Michelle's grandmother. She still lives in Wallerstein, where the fire broke out. She told me what happened on the 27th of April 2012.
I'm sleeping and I get up. So when I hear where somebody's knocking at my door and my windows, and he said, Maina, please, it's burning, open the door. Freddy come out and then he said, Freddy tell, nobody, my sister's also inside there. She was already getting off from the bed, now burning already. And then that man go through that fire, grab Michelle, come out and put Michelle there. The skin of Michelle was in this man's hands.
Michelle's grandmother explained the struggle of single parenting and poverty and the devastating impact of the fire on her family. After the fire, her mother couldn't cope with the guilt, but the family still loves and misses Michelle, and her grandmother wants her to come home.
All of us we make mistakes, but you cannot get through that, Annie. But I don't know how is she. I can look through Michelle's eyes. I can see her pain when she's in pain, when she's not right. When she's right, I see her when she's happy. When she's not happy, I know her.
St. Joseph's will arrange for Michelle to visit her granny. But what does the future hold for this feisty survivor?
Michelle should have a spectacular life. She's got so much going for her. You know, burn is one of those things that brings the best out in you. Many of us don't know what we have until we get sick or we discover what priorities in life really matter. And these children discover it very early. And some of them just discover that amazing something that they have in them.
She will still be my little girl. My little girl. I will really love her just like that. Doesn't matter how she look like. She will still be my little girl, really my beautiful little girl.